houses just washed away.
Washed away. Other houses are washed away.
Wow.
There's nothing in other homes. It's very, very, at least for us, yes, I do have a shelter on my head, at least.
How are you and your neighbors holding up in the midst of all of this?
Oh yeah, we are giving support to each other. At least we are supporting each other by renovating the damage. We are helping each other to fix the damages, and also we pray together for this situation. It's very, very, at least because we are neighbors and we meet together and pray, and we are helping each other by renovating the windows, the doors, and also helping each other to channel water, because the water is still there in some other houses. We are still trying to help them by building the paths for that water to go through. And there are big holes, like in my house, there's a big hole behind my house. And I don't know how am I going to fix that big hole. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
I really wish you the best of luck. I'm glad to talk to you. I'm glad you still have a roof over your head as well. But take care of yourself, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you.
Pindiwe Mashlobani lives in a flood-affected area of Durban, South Africa. Much of the damage and death toll is concentrated in Durban's townships and in the rural communities, and experts say that as a result of societal inequality in South Africa, particularly when it comes to housing. Tafadzwa Mabadli is a professor at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, specializes in climate change adaptation, and is in Durban this morning. Professor, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Pindiwe said that her neighborhood was badly hit by flooding, but my understanding, as I was saying, is that the townships around Durban are even worse. What sort of damage are you seeing there?
There's been extensive damage. We've had floods in Durban before, but this is the worst so far because of the scale of the damage. Houses completely lost, massive flooding, damage to infrastructure, and as you said, in particular, in the informal settlements and townships, there's been quite significant destruction. All properties destroyed, massive landslides, lives lost. It's really terrible.
How would you describe the sort of housing that was, as you say, in those informal settlements before the flood struck? Where were people living?
Within informal areas, actually, it's not a planned settlement, and the structures are poorly constructed. They're often made out of, fabricated steel or wood structures. They often do not have a proper foundation or proper reinforcement. So they're not well-designed structures. They're not resilient structures. So when a flood happens, those people, one, they're vulnerable by virtue of being located within areas that are at risk to flooding, because most of them are in the riparian zones. They settle close to water sources like rivers and stuff like that, or they're living on steep slopes, which themselves are at risk of landslides. So when you have floods like what we witnessed recently in Durban, the people in the low-lying areas are going to experience massive flooding. They're going to have their houses washed away. They're going to wake up with water in their houses. We saw landslides happening. We saw people waking up and not seeing their neighbors' houses anymore.
And have you seen that flooding get worse because of climate change?
There are two things. Scientifically, we cannot attribute the most recent floods to climate change. We attribute them to extreme weather events. But what we do know is that there has been an increase in the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, and that narrative fits within the context of climate change.
The president has acknowledged that there is a failed housing policy in South Africa. What would push people to live in those sorts of areas, as you say, in floodplains or on the steep hills that could be the subject to landslides in the face of those sorts of flood risks? What would push people to live in that area?
There's what we call the poverty, unemployment, inequality nexus, which creates a very vicious cycle affecting the majority of poor South Africans. The legacy of apartheid is also very big. We've got very underdeveloped rural areas. you've got massive unemployment. Like now you've got 60% kids are being unemployed, a lot of them in the rural areas. So they're moving into the urban areas, the cities, in search of opportunities. So one, they are naturally not going to be able to afford decent accommodation in the city space. Two, the cities themselves are not growing, developing new affordable housing at the pace, at the rate at which people are moving into these areas. So then you find informal areas mushroom, and they usually mushroom in areas that are close to industrial areas or sources of employment. Now, those places incidentally are not ideal for human settlements. They must be okay within the flood areas and the steep slopes that are prone to landslides. So even in the past, this government has tried to build houses and move people out of these places into the new houses. You find instances where as others are moving out, others are moving into that space. Because then there's the hope that if I'm there, I could then be the next to get a house. Or someone is allocated a house, but because they are poor, it makes sense for them to rent out the house that's been allocated and come back to live in that same place, because now at least they can earn an income from their house whilst they're living in this place. So those are key issues that need to be addressed.
How do you go about doing that you mentioned the inequality. Something like 10% of the population in South Africa owns 80% of the wealth and the land. How do you create the space to build more suitable housing, more resilient housing?
Look, it's a complex situation. It calls for a system-driven approach that looks at the multiple factors. You need to understand the drivers of all of these lawsuits and people have been harmed.
A huge part of this film is about this lawsuit and the work that was done by lawyers to explore what the truth is about this product and its health effects. Tell me a little bit about, because it's done in some ways like a thriller, the way that this unfolds. The case that was built with Lee and others to try to expose what actually is in this product.
Well, it's fascinating because part of the elements in the film also are, what are mass torts and how do mass torts work as an instrument of justice, which is, many people coming together to sue a corporation.
Like a class action.
A class action. It's the American version of a class action. And remember that no ordinary individual person would ever have the resources to mount a fight against a corporation like this. And so all of these different law groups got together. They had done work together in the past. They, on spec, spent years doing the research, building the case, building Lee's case, and millions of dollars on spec. So if they lost that, they would have lost it. And there's something to me problematic about the fact that it's money damages only. Like, it's not like the heads of these corporations are going to jail for harming people. If I went and punched my neighbor, I would get an assault charge. They don't get that, but they pay out a lot of dough. So that's the mechanism of justice. But as Mike Miller, who is no longer with us, said, it's the working person's key to the courthouse. These mass torts. So that is a huge job in itself, just getting all of that to trial. And the fact that we have agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency or the FDA, for example, when it comes to pharmaceuticals, that are meant to regulate these companies, but actually end up in some ways in collusion with them. There's a revolving door, and nobody seems to think of it as a conflict of interest.
What do you mean in some ways in collusion? Monsanto says that this product can be used safely. The Environmental Protection Agency in the U.S. says that glyphosate is not likely to cause cancer. Health Canada has also approved this product for use in this country. So what's going on there? And this is in part exposed through the film and exposed through this case.
Well, this element of what is called known as agency capture, where you have people who move back and forth between industry and government in these government regulatory bodies, and nobody seems to perceive it as a conflict of interest that you can be working for Monsanto and then go and work for the EPA and then go back to work for Monsanto. But there's a kind of cozy relationship there. And as Robin Greenwald, one of our lawyers, says in the film, these are the people they talk to every day. They don't talk to us. They don't talk to ordinary people. And so it ends up becoming this issue of laxity in some ways. Now, you say that the EPA says that it's safe, and Environment Canada, the International Association for Research on Cancer, which is part of the World Health Organization, which is one of the most respected bodies in the world because of the independent research that it does. No scientist that they use has any skin in the game. All the studies that they use are publicly available so everybody can evaluate their data, and they determined that it was probably carcinogenic to humans. And they got hit from this company. That Monsanto had $17 million set aside for 1 year of public affairs money to kind of take down IARC, to fight against that ruling and to discredit both the scientists that were involved in it and the organization itself.
And in part, you know this because there are 10 million pages of documents, and the lawyers set up some sort of artificial intelligence program to sift through these papers to figure out when and where executives were talking about what has actually caused from this chemical.
Isn't that fascinating? Like, I had no idea that existed. It used to be junior lawyers on both sides
Sifting through
with
pieces of
bankers'
paper.
boxes.
They did some of that also. They did some of that also with this case. They did a bunch of reading and they went through a lot of files.
They have them still in the offices because we've seen them there. But the AI, when you feed all these documents into the computer, it's like a word search on steroids, really. And they found, so the Monsanto papers, which is another big part of this film, were discovered through the discovery process of this trial, where you are seeing elements, emails, internal emails, where people are talking about ghostwriting independent science papers, where people are talking about literally saying, you cannot say that Roundup does not cause cancer. We have not done the carcinogenicity studies. You haven't done this? What? How could you not do those studies and have this many people exposed to it?
You were just diagnosed, Lee, as you mentioned, with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Right.
What effect has that had on your life?
Well, that had almost killed me twice. So I was near death, down many pounds, and facing the uncertain future. I've been through radiation treatments. I've been through chemo treatments. I've taken pills, shots, creams, everything. So it definitely totally changed my life. I didn't have any of those problems before cancer. So I don't know, it was just really tough.
Given what you went through, what was it like as this court case unfolds to see, as you said, some of those documents, some of the claims and statements that were made in those documents about what this product could do?
It was amazing. Like, I didn't sit through a lot of the trial. Like, I showed up every day, and then a lot of times I would just be dismissed to let, do my own thing. And if they needed me, they would call me back. But seeing the evidence and seeing the paperwork and other emails and other things that helped my case, it was amazing to see just how much stuff was behind the scenes that people didn't know about. When I saw that, it really felt worse than the fact of it's okay to drink and the crazy trainings that I got and the bad information that I got that I also gave to other people, because that was my job as the pest controller in that school district. I was supposed to learn and teach and find better ways to do what we do to where it's not harmful to kids. And that was one of the things about Ranger Pro. We use that because it's supposed to be safe enough to use in areas that, are trafficked by young people.
The school districts and what have you.
Teachers and whatever, and they're supposed to have a good, clean environment that they can mingle in every day.
As Jennifer said, you're somebody who isn't generally out in the public. You're somebody who wants to live your life, be behind the scenes, stay healthy, do what you want to do. Why was it important for you to take those steps, to sue Monsanto, but also to be very public about your story?
It's crazy. I said before, and even the first interviews that I was in, is that because of the internet is why I'm sitting here right now.
What do you mean?
Because the Miller firm had already, years before me, had already started compiling evidence and things against Monsanto. So when I went on a basic Google search, this thing just popped up. The Miller firm popped up in my search. If you've been exposed to Roundup, call this number. Like a godsend. I called a number, the rest is history. So the Miller firm had already had the internet connection and already had information. So when they met me and we came together, that was incredible because they already were ahead of me. I was just looking for help. You know what I mean? I didn't have any resources. I lost my job. I was done. I was like in really dire straits. So that internet search and the Miller firm being there is what started all of this and got me to where I am right now.
How's your health now?
I'm on a really good run right now. I have new health care from Queen of the Valley out in California where I'm from. It's a really good hospital, really good doctors, really good team. And I've been on a really good run for about, I would say about maybe 10 months to close to a year here where I have maybe one or two painful things right now that hurt or small scars, but I'm in Canada right now from California, you know, big flight out here. So I'm really healthy right now as far as how, you know, cancer can take you really down to where you're in the bed and you're not doing anything, you're not eating, you're not moving around, you definitely wouldn't want to travel. So I feel really good right now. Of course, I still have cancer. I still go to chemo every 2 weeks. You know, I have to do treatments, but with the treatments that I'm taking, it's really not like the old school cancer treatments where it's like making you more sick with every treatment that you take. So they found some really good stuff, you know, and different research has got a medicine out here that is maybe, you know, it's still medicine, it's still chemo, it's still going in your blood, but it can help you and you can function and you don't have all the side effects. I mean, I don't have my eyebrows, but it is still good.
Could be worse.
Could be worse.
His case was ultimately successful, and the initial ruling was for what, $289 million. The judgment was reduced to $20 million on appeal. What impact do you think the case has had?
Well, I mean, after that, and of course, it immediately went on appeal, and it was 250.